Okay. All right. All right. Here we go. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Nun Zayin. We are in middle of a Gavaldik Sugya regarding the amount of the open area vis-a-vis the entire Midrash area that is left by all of the 48 Arei HaLeviim. As Hashem gave the Leviim 48 cities, Hashem says explicitly that around these cities we have to leave 2,000 amas. 1,000 amma of the 2,000 amma has to be a Midrash, a completely open area. That is the one that's closer to the city. The one that's outside of it, the next 1,000 amma is going to be an area that you may not build anything, but you can plant fields or vineyards. And we quoted the Tosefta that says that the total area of the Midrash is a quarter of the Midrash Aliyah Leviim, is a quarter of the total area that has to be left unbuilt. And the obvious question is, if Hashem tells us that we have to leave 2,000 amma, and only 1,000 ammas of it is to be left completely open, well, 1,000 from 2,000 is half and not a quarter. This is the question that we had. We already covered two answers. We're going to quickly review them. And God willing, we're going to start now by learning an additional two answers for this question. However, we're giving a quick introduction, and that is as follows: that what we are accomplishing in this Pedic, Ketzad Ma'abrim, is that we really extend the 2,000 amma halachic tchum into an area that's much more than 2,000 amma. And as we pointed out, it really amounts in some times that if you walk at a certain angle, that you can walk 3,200 ammas before you come to the end of your tchum. The Chalal Pi Chasidus, this is something that the Rebbe spoke about a lot, that the Rebbe wrote about a lot. This actually connects ERUVIN and Masechta Shabbos. I'm sharing this because Yaakov was asking me to share a few words of the Rebbe regarding the whole content of Erev Tchumen. That being that, for example, the Rambam and Periscope Mishnayos, when he speaks about the Hoitzoah Shabbos issue, which occupies so much of Masechta Shabbos, not being allowed to carry, the Rambam calls Hoitzoah Klolus Inyan Shabbos. Klolus Inyan Shabbos is not to bring something that is from outside, from Klipa, into the realm of Kedusha. If it's out, it belongs out. Klolus Inyan Shabbos is something that is in the place of Kedusha. Don't take it to the area of Klipa. And which is really the whole concept of Erev Tchumen. That when we learn, whether it is like Rabbi Akiva Midoraisa, whether it's just an asmachta, that when it says in the Chumash Al Yetzi Ishva Mekoymai, that a person should not leave his place, not leaving one's place means that we are to live in the place of Yiddishkeit, of Torah mitzvahs. And there are certain boundaries that we have to set for ourselves, not to go beyond it. But on the other hand, you have to understand that the more of the world that can be included in the side of Kedusha, the better it is. So the advantage of learning all of these leniencies regarding that really we extend the 2,000 amas is more than the 2,000 amas, this actually includes a larger area in the world in the realm of Kedusha, which is really ultimately our goal. Number one is that we should not leave the realm of Kedusha, and we should figure out how to include more of the world in the place of Kedusha. Now coming back over here, the premise of the Gemara is that there are many parallels between the din of a Midrash Leviim and the din of a Tchum. Actually, as we learned on Daf Nun Aleph, that the source, or whether it's just an asmachta of the Tchum Shabbos, remember that Zeta Shava from many times over, ultimately comes from the Midrash Leviim. And based on that, let's begin with the following. As we explained the way you make a tchum, and we are applying the same thing to the Arei HaLeviim. If we are starting out with a circular city of the Leviim, and if it's 2,000 amas by 2,000 amas, that's the diameter of the circle. After boxing it out, and then adding the additional 4 boxes, if you remember what we learned yesterday for the tchum, then adding another 4 boxes for the corners, each box occupies 4 million square amas, 4 million square amas. So what's the total amount of square amas that we have? That was the first answer of Rava, very simple. Every box is 4 million. So 4 times 4, because we have 4 tchumen boxes, that's 16 million square amas. Then we have an additional 4 corner boxes, that's another 16 million square boxes, that's 32 million square amas. Remember that number. Step number 2, you have to have a picture for that. But when you're going to make the innermost 1,000 amma, that's closest to the city, into a complete midrash, how much of that midrash will occupy a tchum? It's always going to take up 50%, half of the tchum, but only a quarter of the corner. Only a quarter of the corner. Okay, so how much open area do we have? Well, if we have 16 million tchum, so then we have 8 million midrash, because it's half of the tchum. How much of the midrash takes up from the corners? Only a quarter. So if you have 16 million of the quarters, so here you only have 4 million of the midrash. So 4 and 8 is 12. So there's a 12 million area of midrash, open area, vis-a-vis all of the rest. The total is 32 million. Problem is 12 from 32 is more than a third. So the first doichik that Rava needed to do, and that's why we're going to appreciate why Abai didn't like him, is he says, no, you can't say that we're dealing with 32 million. You have to include the city in the sum total area. The city, which is 2 by 2,000 by 2,000 circle, which again, when you box it, it becomes 4 million square amas. So you add to the 32 the other 4. So Rava says you're beginning with 36. That's what the Tosefta means. From the 36, the Gemara says 12 from 36 is a third. It's not a fourth. So here came the chap of the Gemara, that whenever you have a square, and in this square there is a embedded circle, the square is larger than the circle by a fourth, or the circle is smaller, take off a fourth, and therefore not 12 million square amas are open area. The midrash is not squared, but it's circled. Not like the tchum that is circled. And therefore, you have to take off a fourth. A fourth out of 12 is 3. Deduct from the 12 million, 3, you have 9 million square amas. 9 million square amas from 36 million square amas is exactly a fourth. That was the answer of Rava. Answer Abaya. Abaya didn't like the fact that you need to cheshbon the sum total area to include the city. We would like to only look at the 2,000 square amas. So the solution Abaya gives is brilliant. This Tosefta is speaking about a city, not that it's 2,000 by 2,000, it's only 1,000 by 2,000. Now again, you're going to square it. And then you're going to add that size square is going to go to the tchum. That will be exactly half of the size. So the tchum, the sum total of each box of the tchum, the ones that's due north, due south, due east, and due west, that is going to be not 4 million, 2 million. So Abaya begins with 2 million boxes for the tchum. 2 times 4 is 8. Remember, you have 8 million. But then the corner areas, even when the city is only 1,000 by 1,000, you will notice, if you'll have the picture, that the corners will still be 2 by 2,000, 2,000 by 2,000, or it's going to be 4 million square amas. So here you have 16. 16 and 8 is 24. So the sum total number of what's around the city, without including the city, that's what Abaya benefits, is 24 million square amas. Okay, now how do we come now? Now, how does Abaya coming to the conclusion that the midrash open area is only a quarter? Now we'll do the same thing that Rava does. Same thing now. From the tchum, 2 million, half of it becomes the open area. So instead of you having, like we said, the tchum is 2 million each times 4, half is 1 times 4. So there's 1. So now there's a total of 4 million from the tchum open. The corners are each 1 4, but only a quarter of it is opened. So again, you only have 4, total 4. 4 and 4 is 8. So 8 out of 24. Abaya says 8 out of 24 is still not a quarter. So here Abaya says the same svara of Rava, that the open area is not boxed, but it's actually a circle completely surrounding the inner city. And making the same formula, deduct from the 8. You have to deduct a fourth. So you really only have 6 million square amas of open area. 6 out of 24 is exactly a quarter, which is amazing. So both Abaye and Rava, the advantage of Abaye is that he does not need to include in the sum total square amma. He doesn't have to include the city, which is what he was looking for. But according to him, the Tosefta has to be speaking about a city that's only 1,000 by 1,000. That's where we left off. We're going to have on Daf Nun Zayin another two answers. They're much simpler. And then we're going to have to go a little bit more back and forth, and we're going to close up the sugya explaining the Midrash Halaviyim. We're going to continue on Daf Nun Zayin with a new Mishnah. The Mishnah was already mentioned just a few daf ago, that there's a chiddush of Rabbi Meir, again adding to the Tchum. Pi Chasidus, the more we add to the Tchum, the more of the world is included in the Tzad HaKedusha, which is what we want to happen. That aside of everything we learned above, there's another thing, that outside every city, says Rabbi Meir, you add a karpeif, which means you add an area of 70 amas and 2/3 of an amma, 70 and 2/3 of an amma. Only after that do you begin counting the tchum. With all of the leniencies, bichlal, the two leniencies that we learned before, how you extend and you square out the boundary, and then only from there, how you add the 2,000 amas in the most liberal way, meaning including the most amount of space. So Rav Meir adds a karpef. The Chachamim argue with Rav Meir. The Chachamim say that we know there is a din of a karpef, but the din of a karpef is not to be put outside every city, even though it's completely opened. Only start counting the tchum after you leave the karpef area. That we don't say. We do apply a karpef if you have two cities, and in between them there is either machlekes amiroim, one karpef or two. 70 amas and a third, or 141 and a third. One of those two measurements. That's the machlekes amiroim. Here we say that since in between the two cities there is relatively such a small space, we consider these two cities as one. So if I'm coming from one side of the city, if we will consider both cities as one, even though I left my city and I walked through the karpaf area and I entered the second city and I went to the edge of the second city, since it's only one city, I did not consume any of my 2,000 amas. I only begin counting my 2,000 amas after I leave the other side of the city, which will give every city resident a lot more ability to walk to either direction, a larger amount of space. Okay, that's more or less going to be Daf Nun Zayin. Let's start on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph. 5 lines from the top of the in the middle of the line. Ravina Amar, again coming back to explaining how is it that the open part of the Midrash Halaviyim, how does the Tosefta call that a quarter when it says clearly there's a total of 2,000 amas, 1,000 amas open, 1,000 amas sadus v'karabim, so 1,000 from 2,000 is 50% and not a quarter. That's what we're about. Ravina Omar, my revia, a quarter means revia de tchumen. Look inside the top Tosfos, Pashit, that Ravina holds, says Tosfos, Kesamar, ein migrash likaranos, amachaya. That Bechlal, none of the karanos were used for the open area. The entire karanos can be planted with sadis ukaramim. So let's go, Ravina, with the dimensions of Rava city. Rava city was 2,000 by 2,000, right? And based on those dimensions, we came to a 32 million square amma total of the 2,000 amma. What's a quarter of 32 million? What's a quarter of 32? 8, right? So very simple. Since each one has a sum, each box has 4 million, 16 million a total. Half of that is half of the 16 was left open, only of the tchumen, not of the karamis. So 8 out of 32 is a quarter. Pashit. Or Ravashi says, he says the opposite of Ravina, but it's following the same line. None of the tchumen were left open. None of it. The whole din of open midrash is only in the corners. Ravashi Yomer, my revia de karanos. Again, look inside the top Tosfos at the end of the first line. Ravashi Savar, the Adarabo, ein midrash el karanos. Apashit. And here's going to be the same thing. What's going to be the same thing over here? The beauty here is every keren, right, has 4 million square amma. Now the numbers are not going to match. Every keren has 4 million, which means the total of the koronos is 16 million, just of the koronos. If you only put in the koronos the open part, and the open part is only a quarter of each keren, so you're going to have a total of, right, what's a quarter of 16? 4. But hold a second, 4 out of 32 or is much less than a quarter. Ein chanami. Ravashi is gavaldik. When the Tosefta says that you leave a quarter for the open midrash, he's speaking about that from every corner you leave a quarter of the corner. The Reviyah doesn't go to the sum total area. The greatest of Ravashi's answer is that we're not limiting the Tosefta to be speaking like Rava only to a city that was 2,000 by 2,000. Or the way Abaya says, only a city that was 1,000 by 1,000. Now Ravashi's approach is going to be so gavaldik, no matter how little or how big the city is, you only put it in the koronos, and how much of the koronos becomes open, only a quarter of each keren. And the picture that's online over here was only the corner that touches the corner of the boundary of the city. So that's the pshat reviyah, not a quarter of the sum total area, a quarter of each keren, period. And now we're going to have just some tying up some loose ends. Now it's amazing that Ravashi gave his own answer, but the kasha now, Amalei Ravina le Ravashi. First Ravina is going to challenge Ravashi. According to me, that the open midrash is put not in the kronos but in the tchumen. So if you look at a picture, it surrounds the city much better. It's not as much as a Abaye and Rava, but according to Ravashi, that it's only by the corners. There are huge gaps, as the picture was up there before, around the city that have no open area. So he tells them, I don't understand. It says Saviv Ksiv. Guys, this whole parsha of Midrash is in Masei, and the Torah writes these words that Umigrashay ha'aram asher tiknu la'leviyim bikir ha'ir v'chutza is elef ama saviv. Doesn't saviv mean all the way around? So answers Ravashi, no, it doesn't have to be a contiguous area that surrounds the city open. My saviv dikaranis. Even though you will only have a midrash at a quarter of each corner, so you're going to have in each corner, there's going to be a little bit of a midrash. That's enough for the Torah to say the word saviv, and he proves it to him, because the regarding a carbon oil, basics of kachim, where it says v'zorku es hadam al hamizbeach saviv. Guys, let's quickly chazer. So unlike by a chatos, right, that you put it above the chutasikra on each of the 4 horns, kranais, the oila animal, the blood is put under the chutasikra. But it's not even applied 4 times. It's only really applied twice. Elamai, it's applied by a corner. And then diagonally opposite in the opposite side corner. And when you put blood by a corner, some of it goes to the right, some of it goes to the left. So you end up having a little bit of blood on each side of the mizbech, only at the corners. The Torah uses the word saviv. But you don't put the blood all the way around. You don't make a circle around the mizbech with the blood. So hachinami saviv mamish, we know it's not the case. What do we do? Like I mentioned, you only put the dam by the corners. Elamai saviv means the Torah can use the word saviv even though you're putting it by the koronos. So hachinami says, Ravashi, I stand my ground. A quarter is the Braisa telling you only leave open areas in the koronos and only a quarter of each keren, not half.
So Rabbi, just to be clear, Ravashi really held that the cities of the Levium had these little pockets in the corners that were open, and the other sides were filled with vineyards or whatever.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Exactly. And my saviv the koronos. I mean, the best thing about Ravashi is that, again, he can make the Tosefta be referring to any size city. Okay. Now, to Ravashi, he was not challenging Ravashi Shita here. He is going back to Abaye and Rava. Both to Abaye and Rava, there was a misunderstanding. And he asked, how can you make Bein Abaye, Bein Rava? How can you say that the open area that is only a circle, please, that's a great picture, around the city? How can you say that this 1,000 amma is a quarter It should not even be a corner. Why should it not even be a corner? Because their question was based on the premise that a city by default, even though the city is a circle, even when the city is a circle, as we are learning for here by Tchumei Shabbos, that you put a square around it. And that square, as you can see, at the corners that go beyond the circle from all four sides, top corner right, top corner left, same thing in the bottom, that eats up from the 1,000 amas. You don't even have 1,000 amas. You won't even have 1,000 amas. So the Midrash is going to end up being less than the corner. So you have the protrusion of the corners that are going into the 1,000 amas that you made circular. So the Gemara answers, no, you didn't understand. That was the whole point of Abaye and Rava. That when it comes to measuring the outer tchum, even by the Arei Halavim, 100%, you put this halachic square over the circle. For you to come to the right measurements of the outer 2,000 tchum by Shabbos, by Midrash Halavim. But the city is circular. If the city is circular, so there is no city where you have these dotted lines in the picture. There's nothing there. That taka is left open. Where the bride, the Tosefta, is speaking about a circular city. But my sigulta, you squared it. So the Gemara says here, we square it halachically. We square it to know how to draw out the outer boundaries of the 2,000 total amas of the Midrash. What did the Chachamim say regarding the first square around the circle? That chazinon keman demerabah. It's as if it's squared, and we have to square it. Because the only way we know where to place both the tchumen, then where to place the koronos are placed not touching the city. They are placed touching the box that's dotted. So it's a halachic concept. But did we actually, is the city a square? The city is not a square. Since the city is a circle, when you leave the closest area around the city completely open, you leave the entire 1,000 amma open, including the areas of the corners. So yes, you're going to have a total, as we mentioned, l'Rav of 9,000. L'Abaye we had a total of 6,000, and it works out. And those numbers are exactly a quarter of the sum total. Final question. A great question. Let's go back to what we learned yesterday. What did we learn? Another rule. That by the fact that we place the tchumen and the koronos, the way we explained it, it's not that we measure from the corner diagonally 2,000 amas. Had we done that, then if you would go straight up, you would only have, like we mentioned, 1,428. First, we put the tchumen on all the due directions, due north, due south, due east, or west. And then when you add the koronos, the same exact size box. So we learned then, if you're going to measure diagonally, you're not going to have 2,000, you're going to have 2,800. So we learned. But now we also learned a formula that Abaye used, that Rava used, that when you have a circle inscribed in a box, so we said, how much area, right, is the circle less than the box? We learned by a quarter. Now let me repeat the same one. Let me repeat, that's the rule. Kama meruba yesad ala eagle. How larger is the square from the circle? A quarter. Now, my friends, let me say the same thing. Let me, in different words, which is very important to Chap the Gemara's question. If you were to have a square amma, and so it occupies 4 square amas. If you were to inscribe a circle in it, so how much is it less? It's less by a quarter, which means how big would the square amma will be inside the circle? 3 square amas. And now if you go from the circle to the square, let me go in the opposite direction. So what do you need to do if you have a circle that has 3 square amas and you're going to put a box around it? You know what you do? You divide it into thirds. It's the same thing. You divide the circle into thirds and add 1/3 over that. You understand? If you add another third to 3s, that's the quarter, that's the 4th. So let me make the same cheshbon with the box. If I have a box of 2,000 square amas, and I want to add this formula, so what do I need to do? I need to take 2,000. I'll divide it into 3. If you divide 2,000 into 3, it's 666 dot 2/3, and add that to the total square footage, And then l'chu'ura, you should end up not with 2,800, but with 2,666.66. And how did you get to the 2,800? Since we have this formula that if that's the case, it's gavaldik again. When you say a fourth, I'm saying a fourth is that if you have a square and you put a circle in it, the circle will be less by a fourth. But let me go in the opposite direction. If I'm beginning with a circle and I'm putting a square around it, how much will I be adding? It's correct to say I'll be adding an additional third of the amount of the circle. Same thing. Circle is 3 square amas. If you're putting a box around it, it will become 4 square amas. What's shot? You take 3, divide it into 3, divide the circle into 3, and add a third of it. Take 2,000, divide it into 3, 666.2 thirds. Add that to the 2,000. Again, that's 2,666. Is it 800, like you said before, the 2,000 in the diagonal will be 2,800? No, it shouldn't be that much. It should only be 2,000 plus shit meya v'shitin v'sheva, 667 minus a third, which is 666.66. You gave too much space, so answers the Gemara that you are confusing two formulas together. Amalei hanamili, that a square is larger than a circle that's inscribed in it. That's exactly when you have a circle inside a square, then we gave the right formula, right? The circle is a fourth less area than the square around it. But whenever you're making the current cheshbon of figuring out that if you have a box and if you were to measure each side, you have 2, how much will the diagonal be? So there the rule is tafei tfei, be'ina tfei. You need a larger amount of number. In other words, the diagonal of a square increases its length over the radius of the circle by a greater percentage, which is why you're not going to have 2,666.6, you're going to have 2,800. And what's that formula? The Amar Mar, kol hamsa b'ribua, every square amma, take a square amma. So if you measure the top, it's 1 amma. If you measure the diagonal, it's going to be 1 amma and 2/5 of an amma, or approximately 1.4, which is a larger amount. And that's that formula is going to come out again, that if you are going to measure the diagonal of the corner of the halachic square border of the city to the end of the halachic tchum that you placed around it, going to the corner of the tchum, you're going to see you're going to have not 2666.66, but you're going to have 2,800 amas to walk. And so again, and then we mentioned, then you add another 400. You add another 400 because the city is a circle. When you place a box over it, you have another 400. And now you're going to have, like we mentioned, that if you walk in a certain direction, the tchum is only 2,000 amas, but you know what you really ended up with? 3,200 amas. It's 2,000 plus 4 plus 8. Okay, moving on to the next Mishnah. And all of the sugya is what we are really doing is that we are expanding the tchum. Not by changing the number of 2,000, but by adding in more halachas. Now, this is a big leniency that only Rab Meir holds by. Says the Mishnah that every city is giving the area known as a karpaf, which is 70 amas and 2/3 of an amma, le'ir, even not because there's something built within that karpaf area. Oh, if something is built there, then everyone agrees that it is ma'abir the city. With an ayin, with an aleph. No. Nothing is there. Still, you always first gave 70 amas and 2/3. Now, why is that? We'll see. There's a concept that every city, come back to the Midrash Alavim. It's a beautiful thing that when you enter a city, right, the immediate area around the city is open. It adds to the city. Something that adds beauty to the city is like part of the city. So the closest, and people also used to use that area to store stuff. So because of that, it's considered an extension of the city. The Chachamim agree that in a certain scenario you have karpaf, but it's not always. Yeah, if you have 2 cities. Oh, very good. And im yesh lezu. Now, when you're looking at the picture, whoever's looking at this picture, he placed over here 141 and a third. Now, this is actually the shita of Rav Huna, But Rab Chia bar Rav doesn't allow that much space. That's a machlokes amaroim. But the concept of allowing two cities to be viewed as one city, and what do we gain by that? Everything. We gain that if a person is in Ir Aleph, at the end to the right, if they become halachically one city, then when he walks to the left, and he walks out of Ir Aleph, and he walks across the Karpav, and he walks through the whole Ir Beis, if they are one city, you know what? He walked nothing. He's still in his Dalad Amas. He only will begin counting 2,000 Amas when he goes to the left of Ir Beis, if they are one city. Chachamim say, meaning that im yesh lezu shivim amma v'shirayim. Now it's mashma. I know what's mashma. Lezu shivim v'shirayim. The words of the Mishnah seem to be saying that you need to, that you allow this leniency even up to 141 and a third. But we're going to see in the Gemara lav dafka. Right, Chia Barav won't be refuted by this. Oise karpa feshteim liyos echad. They become halachically one city. Furthermore, says the Mishnah, the final case, if you have three villages, ha mishulashin. Now, mishulashin can mean two things. Either it means they are in one row, not two, three. Or mishulashin means they are set as a triangle. Ooh, that's a whole different din, as we'll see in the Gemara. Then, im yesh bein shnayim hachitzonim. If in between the two outer ones, there is if you have 141 and a third, but not more, then since there is one in the middle, also the one in the middle will make all the outer ones be considered one. Let's leave this for the Gemara to understand what the Mishnah is adding to what we learned above. So first of all, we will learn that the Gemara's kasha is Rav Meir. Rav Meir gives every city a karpev. Minon Amili answers Rava. Guys, let's appreciate that on Daf Nun Aleph Orei, Tchum is learned from Orei Alavim. In the Orei Alavim it says Mikir Ha'ir V'chutza. So the pshat is that if there's a walled city, you begin counting right after the wall. But he has a drush over here. Amr Torah, first Tein Chutza. Don't count when you are immediately out of the city. First, there is some area that's out, that's still part of the city, and only then medoid. And how much is that? Al Pisfara, the concept of a karpiv of 70 amas and 2/3 of an am. However, the Chachamim Amru, no, that we only apply this din of karpiv in between two cities. Now, how much space do we allow between two cities? That's what we had in Mamash right now, Daf Nun Hey. So Itmar Afuna says, Lakula, Noisten, like the picture we had before, Noisten Karpav Lazu, Vi Karpav Lazu. We even allow 141 and a third. However, Chiyabaraf says no, that you only allow one Karpav for both. If it's more than 70 amas and 2/3 of an amma, then these two cities do not connect. And now the Gemara is going to go back to the Mishnah, and we're going to see how each one is going to have to interpret the Mishnah Lishitos Soy. The Gemara says in our Mishnah, Chachamim say, Karpav b'loshen yachid. We don't say Karpav b'loshen yachid, ela bein shtei ayoros. So it's l'chayra mashma, one Karpav for both cities. That's an ayitachia. Banav, it's a yufta de Rafuna. Says the Gemara, Rafuna, no, my Karpav, not one physical Karpav, the Torah of Karpav. But Ula Olam, Karpav Lazul. And now Rafuna is going to continue reading our Mishnah, and he's going to show that the Seifa is going to be like him. Right? 3 or 4 lines from the bottom. Me the Tani Seifa im yesh lazu ayanama v'shirayim ulazu ayanama v'shirayim. Then oisa karpav l'shteihem. Right? Those like the Bach over here. Oisa karpav eshteihem liois achas. Shmamina. You have 2. And I don't know about fact. You're going to layman take you to the Rabbi Barav. Zion on the base. No. That line of the Mishnah is going according to Rav Meir. Rav Meir always gives for each city by default a karpav. So according to Rav Meir, you can have 141, and now it doesn't really flow in the Mishnah. Look inside the top Rashi, because it's behemshach to the words of the Chachamim. So Rashi says, "Enachanami ha seifa stamahi." The way you would think. We have machlokes Rav Meir and the Chachamim, period. And now the Mishnah continues, and this continuation is Rav Meir. But asks the Gemara, Rabbi Meir, who needed it? He already told you in the Reisha that you give nice and kapar v'leir dividend of Meir. So of course, if there's 2 cities, you're going to have for each city a karpov. So the Gemara says, no, there's a chiddush to that tzricha, because the Ima, he had Rav Meir only expressed his opinion by one city that's a standalone city. I would have thought yachad l'chada, like he says. But if there are 2 cities, maybe you only give 1 karpa for both. L'chad l'tarta as well. Kumash Malan, that what? That the l'tarta, that when you have 2 cities, today you give 2 cities. Now, why didn't he only say it over there? Meaning by the Seifa, I would argue Mishum the Dchika Tashmishtayu. Look inside the Rashi, that's the key Nukud explaining Rabbi Meir, 4 lines from the top, the lowest wide line, the Hoyel the Keroiva, since it's near a city. The 2 cities are near each other. And there you won't have the beauty of the city, right? The base Karfifois Adi Ikatfei. There, you want to leave more open space, even if you have 141, but you don't have more than that. So therefore, there's no beauty there. So you can't even consider it a separate city. That's why they are combined. But maybe Rashi says, if it's an open area outside the city, I mean, people are not bound to only using 70 yamas. It's an open area. So they can use more space. It's nice. There's a lot of avira. Maybe in such a scenario, you won't even give 1 karpov. You won't even give that. It's open anyways. So a maloi, meaning you won't even give a karpov to say that you have first count a karpov and then measure. So that's why Rameh needed to say, no, every city is given for 70 amas and 2/3. And only then do you begin to count the 2,000 amas. Says the Gemara, okay, let's go back to the final part of the Mishnah. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, and that's something that we have to clarify. That v'chein shloisha kfarim ha-mishulashin, that if you have 3 villages that are grouped together, now we didn't explain exactly how are they grouped together. Here the Mishnah again clearly says that if you have between the 2 outermost one, a total, it means in between, you're counting the in between, the inside of the right one to the inside of the left one. If you have a total of 141 and a third, then we use the 3rd one as the connecting city. Then so what does that imply? Now the problem is, because according to the Bechia Barav, it makes sense. According to the Bechia Barav, in a Chanami, you only give 70 amas and 2/3 of an amma between the 2 cities. So the chiddush of the Mishnah is when you have 3 cities, right? You want to have beineihem, you want to have in between them a total of open area of 141. Fits. But according to Rafuna, you are allowed to have in between 2 cities 141. So what is the Mishnah saying? And in other words, only by 3. If there wouldn't be a 3rd city, what? Then 141 won't be good. So no. When 2 cities are open in between each other, you allow 141 and a 3rd to connect them together. You allow that. You don't need a 3rd city. The case over here is, now before we read in the Gemara, guys, look, I know by me, look inside to the left of Rashi, you see the triangular? You have like 3 stars. I have them over my Gemara. These 3 stars, let's just place the 2 ones that are in the bottom, and then in between them, but on the top is the 3rd one. That's the case of our Mishnah. That Ha'itman Allah, Amar Rabba, or you have on the side Amar Rabba, or Rav Ada, Amar Ravidi Bar Chanina, Loi Mishulash Mamish. The safe of the Mishnah is not when they are aligned in a row. Eloroyin, we're speaking about a triangle. Eloroyin kol she'ilu matel emsoy b'neim v'yu mishulashim ve'ein bein zelozeh elokuf mem amavach shlish amam. That was the picture that you put up before. If the area in between the 2 cities, my friend, is more than 141 and a 3rd, more, much more. If it's much more, then normally they're not combined. But here says Rafuna, take the star in the top and bring it down. That the city takes up space. Now, if the open area between A and B and C, which is the picture you had before, Or the picture before we had was good also. According to Rafun, okay, no, this, whoever put that up, that was the correct picture. The Maila here is you have a lot more than 141. When you bring it down, now, according to many Rishonim, we still allow between the imaginary, here you have on the screen, Aleph, Beis, Gimel. So Aleph, Gimel are the outermost cities, and there's many, many times more than 141 and a third in between them. So you have the right to take the third one in the triangular, to halachically put it in between it, and now we apply the law of Rafuna. That if we have 141 and a third on each gap, it's still all considered connected. So which bottom line means if you are in city Aleph, you are allowed to walk all the way to city Gimel, and you still did not eat up 1 ounce of your 2,000 amas. So only when you go under Gimel do you begin counting the 2,000 amas. Then Oisen and Soy Shlosh Aliyah Echad. Okay.
Yeah, but Rabbi, doesn't it still say 70, 72, and 71 and 2/3? So like, how do we get to this 141 and a third in between Aleph and Beis and Beis and Gimel?
First of all, we bring the Beis in the picture here to in between, and then Aleph has 70 and 2/3, and Beis has 70 and 2/3 on the same side. Happens to be that some of the Shoinim don't learn that way. They learn that when you bring Beis in, here you only can have 70 amas in between them. That means that we're gonna stick over here to the way people understand Rashi. Okay, now based on the fact that we established that the Mishnah and the Sefer is speaking about a triangular, how much space for us to be allowed to bring Beis in between Aleph and Gimel? Or if you're looking inside the picture in Rashi, for you to be allowed to bring down the star in between the two on the bottom, how close, is there a limit? What happens if it's 10 miles away? Just because on the map, if you would have brought it down, it would have been in between. Is there a limit? So he said, yes, there is a limit. You have to be allowed to walk from Aleph to Gimel, or from Aleph to Beis, whatever the number was in the picture. You have to be allowed to walk from one of the two to the one that's standing by itself. In other words, it has to be 2,000. If it's beyond 2,000 amas, then you can't bring it down. And now we're going to challenge all that from Binim that, again, we just learned a few daf ago in the city that looks like a keshes. And we are allowed to make believe as if it's filled up and make like a bowstring and only count to 2,000 amas beyond the keshes. Asks the Gemara, but didn't you, Abaye, yourself say, that that when you have the bowstring, and right, that we are allowed to create the bowstring, even if there's more than 2,000 amas, if you were to measure, right, from the lowest part of the bow to this halachic bowstring, we allow more than that. So why over here are you limiting that the third city can only be brought down if it's within 2,000 amas or less? So the Gemara gives Gavaldi. Over there, ikabatim. Over there, like we mentioned, you do have, at least there is a bow. That means that any person can walk from one side to the city to the other if he walks through the places of the houses. The both sides, since both sides you can go from the middle to any part of the outer edges of the city, that's why I don't care how much space there is from the open area until the halachic bowstring. But over here, when you have these two cities, there's nothing in between them. It means here you want to bring in the third city. How do you get to the third city? What connects the third city? You have to be able to walk to the third city. Okay, another kash. Let's go with the bowstring. Is there a limit between the two outer cities? So he answered, no, there's no limit here. No, there's no outer limit. Forget about the 141. It can be more than 4,000. It can be more than 4,000 and more. Here, Danny. Which means, even if it's between the two cities that are aligned, even if the area in between them is 4,000 and more. Now, guys, what did we learn by the bow city? Remember that? Even according to the Shita that we allow from the middle until the top, more than 2,000 amas, but it can't even be 4. It can't even be 4. It has to be 3,999. There has to be an overlap. Yeah, here it can be more. It can be a dollar alaf amma. So now the kasha is no. The amar afuna that keshes im yesh bein beis rishel. Only if in between the two edges, the inner part of the top edges, less than four, pachus ma'arbas alafim. Then moedidin lo min hayesed. Then can we count from the bowstring? But v'im lavim lo min hakeshes. And the Gemara gives a moedidik answer. Armalei hasam lekalamemer male. There, it's harder to fill it up. If you don't have less than 4,000 amas, you can't say mali. Filling it up there is difficult. Here, it's easier to say you fill it up. Let me explain to you why. If anyone can put up any picture on the board, that will be helpful. That's a Gavaldic logic. No. Let's go back. The picture prior. A picture of the bow. Any picture with the bow. Let me explain to you what's happening in the Mishnah and the Brisa with the bow. We're almost doing a paradox. My friends, when you can put a bowstring, and you make believe as if it's filled up. So I get it. If I'm walking, the way it's positioned over here, it's a frown. I like a smiley face, but I put it upside down. If you are living in the center of the bow, and we give you a bowstring, so what are we saying? It's as if the city comes all the way down to this imaginary line where it's pachus from 4,000, which means that if I start walking from the top to the bottom, I only begin counting my 2,000 amas after I pass the bowstring. But let me ask you another question. If I'm walking from the center of the bow, I'm going up. From where do I begin counting the 2,000 amas? From where the actual city is. In other words, it's not that we're bringing the bow down. We're not straightening out the bow. If we were to straighten out the bow, then you gain 2,000 amas from one direction, but you lose it from the other direction. Here we're doing a paradox. We're saying, no, the bow stays where it is. If you are walking from this picture, from the middle of the bow up, or you only start counting when you actually leave the city. But still, we also schlep it down. Since we're doing a double leniency, that's why if it's less than 4,000 amas between the tips, can we say that it's mamash filled? If it's 4,000 amas and there's no overlap, we cannot fill it. Masha Enkin over here in the case of the triangular, look at the beauty. When you live in the middle city, whichever picture you're going to use, we're not saying that the people that live in the middle city get to walk all the way first to in between the houses. And only then do they begin counting the 2,000 amas. We do not say that. We don't say that. We are saying that the people that live in the middle city, they are bound to the 2,000 amas when they leave their city in either direction, from the top or from the bottom. Elama, we only are saying that Roy in the middle city, Ki'ilu, it's between the two cities, as far as being allowed to carry in between these two cities. And that's why we allow for there to be 4,000 amas or more in between the two cities. Gewaldig. Omar relayed up Safra Lirava. Now he's going to give an example of the dinim that we're learning, even if we go with Rav Huna. When can we connect two cities? Lechachamim, if in between them there's 141 and a third or less. But if there's more than that, we don't. So then the two cities are two separate cities. So if I'm in city A, if I'm walking to city B, I'm already eating up my 2,000 amas. Problem is, Harei B'nai, there was a city called Akistafoin, and they neighbored a city called Ar Dashir. They were on the two opposite sides of the Diglas of the Tigris River. And the fact was, the Mashchina Nohu Tchuma Mahaigisa, the Ar Dashar. If they were to walk from Akistafoin to Ar Dashar, to Ar Dashir, then that walk would not even consume any of their 2,000 amas. They would be allowed to walk that, and then they would be allowed to walk through the whole city of Ardashir. And only when they walk to the opposite side did they begin to eat up the 2,000 amas. And the same thing in reverse, that the people that lived in Ardashir, if they were walking to Akistafoin, it was considered one city. That Mishachina Lutuchum, we extended Chum for them. Mahaigisa, that Akistafoin, and all of the area in between is considered all part of the same city. Now, how can we connect two cities? Even if we're going to follow the most lenient interpretation, B'shitas Chachamim, that's only going to be if there's in between them 141 and a third. If there's more than 2 karpefs, then it's considered 2 separate cities. So he went ahead, Rab Safra went ahead, he measured, and he said, Ho'ika, Diglas, the Mifsaka, right then the river of the Diglas in between these 2 cities occupied more than a Memei of Arboim Ba'achas U'Shlish. So why were the residents of both cities considering them halachically to be all part of the same city? Answers the Gemara, what happened there is that the Rava showed the Rab Safra something that he didn't know of. And that is that a while before this, there used to be walls that are now collapsed and covered by the Diglas. Those walls weren't only walls. Those walls had in them residences inside the walls above the height of the water. Now those walls collapsed in part, but there was still 10 tfachim or more of those walls that were now covered by the river. Happened to be that, again, these walls weren't only walls. There was a base dira in each wall. When the wall was standing, because of a din that we didn't speak about yet, Rav Meir says you add a karpav by default. The Chachamim hold that if there is a hut or a house, not a house, a burganim, a proper house that is within this 70 amas and 2/3 of an amma, it extends the city l'kula alma. And what happens is between one hut, you go another 70 amas and you have another such hut. You extend it again. So you did have previously these little huts that really connected these 2 cities together. We're not using the rule that open area karpaf. It's not open area. There were houses. The houses collapsed. They were still standing under the water. And the chiddush is that we still count them. Nafik, went out to Achalei Shodim. That Mahach, Hanoch, At, Mahasa, Bishura, certain sections of city walls that had residences in them. That now, the Mebale that are now swallowed in the Diglas, and each wall was within the other, and ultimately on both sides within their respective cities, not more than 70 amas and shinayim, which is 2/3 of an amma. So that's why these 2 cities are considered connected. And even though some of the wall collapsed and it's completely covered by the water, and we're very lenient when it comes to Tchumen, and we consider these 2 cities to be the same city. We have another few minutes just to start the Mishnah. Then we'll continue in the Mishnah tomorrow. We have 2,000 amas. Now that we established from where do you count it, how do you actually measure 2,000 amas? So today we have technologies. Today there's laser technologies. It becomes very easy to measure 2,000 amas. The Mishnah wants to tell us one din, and that is that if the ground that you are measuring is not completely straight, if you have little hills, you have valleys, you don't put the measuring stick on the ground. If that were to happen, since you have crevices and you have protrusions, that would eat up more amas. Then you would end up closer to the city. You don't do that. That you include, you span your boileya, mountains and valleys, you measure the ear space, and you get to go out a complete 2,000 amma. Again, lakula, which will end up placing the tchum further away, with many other specific details as we will have in the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Ein moedin ela b'chevel shel nun amma. When it comes to the ropes, then a chevel that's 50 amas is the perfect size. If a chevel is going to be even bigger than 50 amas, you're not going to get it perfect. So really, you need to have, ideally, many people. So I'm standing here, you're standing 50 amas away from me. How do I know that? Because I'm holding on to one end of the rope, and so are you. And not only that, but we don't even want for the rope to be inclined, because then it's eating up a little bit more space. So when you have people that have the same average height, and they both hold the rope near their heart, as you have in the picture, that's the straightest that you can get. We don't want less than 50. We don't want more than 50. And now, the Rishonim speak out, if the ground is completely flat, then you can put it on the ground. Ein achanami. But if the ground is not completely flat, I'm going to hold the rope up and you're going to hold the rope down. Again, it's creating an incline, which will end up, you're using some of the 2,000 amas for the incline. No, we can use 2,000 amas for straight. And therefore, if there is a valley as you had before in the picture, I don't care how deep the valley is. Or if you come, that's the picture of a gader. Gader doesn't only mean a fence. It means that there was a wall that collapsed. So you have a heap of rocks. So again, you don't want to lose any of that space. So mavliya, you span it. So one example is the way you have in the picture. Because you have to measure it in a way where you're not spending any of the 2,000 amas, right, for inclines or declines. And then the chayzel lemidasai. Higia lahar mavliai the chayzel lemidasai. We'll stop over here. God willing to be continued. I'm just going to go run and quickly shut my machine. Over there, I lost my machine.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't have to repeat this year. It's a good one.
I don't mind repeating this year, but it was Gavalik share. I hope I was clear in the beginning.
It's great.
We're really great. Really great.
Rabbi and Abaya, just don't test us on it, Rabbi. Right? Shkoyach.
Shkoyach. Guys, have a great day.
I get